Lesson 2 in Module 3, exercise that works. So why would we continue to exercise in pregnancy? All the great reasons that exercise is great outside of pregnancy, but especially for type 1. Those who continue to exercise in pregnancy are 20 to 25% less likely to experience preeclampsia when they are getting in 150 plus minutes of weekly exercise. You're going to see improved A1C averages by 0.3 to 0.5% with any kind of consistent program. And you're going to see reduced insulin requirements by 15 to 20%. When you're comparing exercises versus sedentary or exercising versus sedentary pregnant women. Going back to this first point here, a 30% reduction in severe hypoglycemia episodes. Here, I think we're really talking about like the benefits that we have in exercise is in our overall management. And so because we are more sensitive as a result of exercising, you're going to see fewer significant issues or severe hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia. So some safety guidelines, and these are going to be broad, but there are standard precautions. So things like, you're not wanting to fall. You want to reduce your fall risk. Specific to type 1, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to how low you are. Like don't go out for a run or for a hike if you're at 90, unless you have your snacks and you're prepared to kind of continually monitor. Second trimester, this is a great time to be exercising because you're going to experience, like some people call it the second trimester glow, where you feel more energized. Some of that morning sickness has dissipated, and so you're feeling pretty good. You're not quite as tired. So it's a great time to be able to get exercise. And then third trimester, you continue to see continued benefits, even when you're reducing your intensity. So maybe you're not lifting as heavy or you're not pushing your heart rate as much. There's a note there about target heart rates. So these are going to be different than during when you're not pregnant, of course. And that's not specific to type 1. But something that I think can be really helpful is to in the first trimester, in the second trimester, in the third trimester, maximize your insulin around your insulin resistance. So for me, that's, I see it in the morning, and that's of course common, but I try to get even 10 minutes of exercise in the morning. And that really helps me set the stage for the rest of my day. Sometimes it's a walk, sometimes it's a full, strength workout or a Pilates workout. But it can be really minimal. It doesn't have to be intense. So some just glucose management. These are going to be things that are pretty common. So pre-exercise carbs, 15 to 30 grams, if your blood sugar is below 120. And you'll want to adjust this throughout pregnancy. As I outlined in the last lesson, the more that your insulin to carb ratio, like the smaller that gets, the greater impact that amount of carbs will have on your blood sugar. So you may not need as much as 30 grams, but you do want to be prepared, right? We don't want to go out for a run or for a walk and end up low without having something with us. If you are going to be doing something that is more in that cardio realm as compared to something like Pilates or strength training, then it might be appropriate to have a basal reduction 1 to 2 hours before exercise, depending on if you are less than 120 and what kind of exercise it will be. Again, if it's going to be cardio where you're using the glucose for energy as compared to the resistance training where you're not going to see as much of a change immediately in your blood sugars, you won't need that reduction in basal rates. You're going to want to watch for up to 12 hours after your exercise just to see if that's where that low is coming in. Again, going back to pattern recognition, including that kind of in the back of your mind. And then activity-specific patterns, aerobic exercise. If we're moving a lot, if we're getting our heart rate up, it is more likely that we're going to have a change in our blood sugars. But resistance training, strength training in particular, you can actually, generate a different shift in your blood sugars where you might see an actual increase. But for the most part, things like Pilates, things like strength training, you're going to have more stable blood sugars during, even though overall, over the entire 24-hour day, you will see that you are more sensitive. One important caveat or exception would be high intensity exercise. So something like HIIT training, if you're doing a 15-minute, 20-minute high intensity interval training, you're likely going to see a bump in your blood sugars and then a drop. The intensity of that bump is going to depend on you as an individual. But that has to do, again, with cortisol and what's happening, to allow your body to produce the results that are happening in the HIIT session. So cortisol, adrenaline, our body responds with these hormones when we're asking a lot of it. And a HIIT workout also won't be as intense when you're pregnant because you're avoiding that big of a swing in your blood, in your heart rate rather. But just things to pay attention to. Some tips. Again, morning workouts can help curb your insulin resistance. Post-meal walks or exercise, again, even like 5 to 10 minutes can significantly reduce those spikes. And again, especially with a high carb meal. If you can't get outside and walk, and that's like your favorite thing to do, you could choose a few body weight exercises, squats, calf raises, modified jumping jacks, lunges, bicep curls. If you've got a pair of dumbbells or something like that, you could do it without dumbbells. It doesn't really matter. And then do 2 to 3 sets of 10 each. In my first pregnancy, I worked like in a setting where I couldn't go out and just take a walk. But I also didn't have a ton of privacy. So I would go to the back room and I would, do 2 to 3 sets of squats, jumping jacks, lunges, and then like body weight arm or body weight biceps, and sometimes do like an inclined wall push-up. A really fascinating study was just released that looked at calf raises on their own, and how doing like 5 to 10 minutes of just literally raising your calves up and down. So if you've got your foot sitting flat and you're like raising your heel, that calf raise even in a seated position, increased glucose sensitivity and was the driver of improved blood sugar results after a meal. So, if you're stuck at your desk truly and you've got a high blood sugar, you can increase your insulin sensitivity by that mechanism. If you're on an airplane, if you're stuck in the car, and I personally tested this, actually, I had to drive to an appointment and it was an hour and a half in the car and I was seeing my blood sugar come up a little bit and I didn't have any insulin on board. And I just spent 10 minutes like calf raising, cars on cruise control and I'm on the highway and I saw the impact. It was kind of wild. So there's really good data out there now to support this. And if you think about it, if you're on a walk, your calves are that's the muscle that's being engaged with walking too. Of course, it's a whole body thing in that sense, like your whole body's moving, but the muscle that's really facilitating the movement of glucose out of your blood and into your cells is your calf muscles. So super cool. So again, exercise that required you to reduce your basal rate or your insulin in general pre-pregnancy or in the first trimester might not be required. That modification might not be required in the second and third trimesters. Actually, let's circle back. Something else that can really help with a high carb meal, in addition to pre-bolusing, in addition to getting out for some exercise right after, is, and this is such a sensitive topic, but because it's so complicated. But if you think about glycemic index, that as a big concept is complicated. But one thing that I have found to be really helpful outside of, incorporating fiber, protein, and fat is having a glass of water that has, say a tablespoon, so a good sized glass of water, but then a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice. it really helps with the overall glycemic index of the meal. So, say I'm having some chickpea pasta. I'm getting extra protein in from the chickpeas, but the fiber in there is helping bring down the impact of the carbs. I'll also usually have a glass of water that has, some lemon juice in it, just to help with curbing that overall glucose spike and the impact of glucose in that situation too. And that can be just a really simple way to go about having a modest decrease in what might otherwise be a spike. And I found that to be really helpful. Okay, so takeaway: exercise reduces complications, improves glucose control. You'll adjust your intensity by trimester, and you'll monitor, including that information in your assessment of your blood sugars. And you'll want to make sure that you're considering exercise as a culprit if you're experiencing lows up to 12 hours later.